And then if you just want to say hi, you're Gretchen, and get started
Sure.
from there, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just get this going so you have something to look at besides me. So hi, everyone. I am Gretchen Gigan. I am a product owner at the Center for Open Science, which means that I'm a person who works with our software development team and stands in for the user to help determine what new features to develop, what issues to address, things like that. I am a librarian. I got my MLS in 2005, a long time ago. I just started working here at the Center for Open Science about a year and a half ago. And so because of that background, I work a lot with our institutional members who are often libraries. So I'm going to talk a lot today, excuse me. I'm going to do kind of an overview of what OSF is, how the platform works, what some of the, I think, interesting and useful features of OSF are. We'll talk a little bit about our institutional membership program. And then we'll talk about how OSF is making some efforts to address recent compliance and reporting mandates. And we should have plenty of time for questions if you have any. I'll just apologize in advance. I'm having a little bit of breathing issues, so if I stop and seem like I'm panting, it's because I just need to take a second to breathe. Okay, so I work at the Center for Open Science. So Center for Open Science is a nonprofit based in the US, and our mission is to increase openness, integrity, and reproducibility of research. So we have kind of three different divisions. We have a policy/programs team, which Crystal, my colleague who is also here on the call, is a part of. And that group works on training and education programs, outreach programs. They also work with publishers, just lots of things to kind of change the incentives and change the community's understanding and use of open science practices. We also have a research team that does meta-science research, research on the research process. And so their input helps to kind of elucidate the values and the benefits of open science, and also take a look at the research process and how that can be made more efficient and more effective. I am on our infrastructure team, and we build tools and software to make that culture change in science easier to, or even possible to accomplish. So our main software platform that we work on is called the Open Science Framework, or OSF. And OSF is a free open source online research platform, and it's designed to support researchers openly and transparently across all stages of the research life cycle. So not just publishing the final research publication or the data set after it's been analyzed, but the entire process. And we do that by supporting three main kind of what I refer to as OSF objects. So OSF is really organized around these three primary ways of interacting. Registrations, which are done at the beginning, usually towards the beginning of a project. Projects, which are open kind of collaborative space for carrying out research, and preprints, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. So the metadata that's in the OSF platform is really organized around these three objects as opposed to individual files, which is a little bit different than some other repositories. That's not to say that there isn't metadata about files and that files can't be found discreetly, but they're organized around these kind of central concepts. So I'm going to go through each of them quickly. So a registration is a tool for certifying what you are planning to do in a project before you do your data analysis. So the idea is that you declare what your hypothesis is, what your plan is, how you plan to carry out your work, and then that's captured by us and recorded in a format that cannot be edited. It can be updated as your plans change. But this means that a researcher can't go back and change their hypothesis after they see their data. So registrations can be done really at any kind of early stage of the process, but they're most useful when they're done before data collection starts. So it also is useful because it provides a kind of snapshot, or it's a way of recording different stages of a research project. So because you create it and it can't be changed, and it gets stored, saved by us, and it also gets backed up in the Internet Archive, you can make updates at certain points to record the progress across the project. And files can be attached to the registration. So if you want to include some methods, or at the end of the process, some data or some output with the registration, you have everything kind of in one place in a kind of codified view. Projects then are our collaborative space, really intended for the interactive, the working part of the research project. But they are just an open space for anybody to use. There's no requirement that an OSF user has to be a researcher or a specific kind of researcher. OSF started in the social sciences and has a lot of uptake in that communities. But we have researchers, across the board, hard sciences, life sciences, arts and humanities. It's really a useful tool for anybody. It doesn't have to be research. Projects then are a space to organize and collaborate materials, essentially. And they can be used to centralize materials across many different platforms. So you can create an OSF project and you can upload files directly to OSF, and you can create subdirectories to further organize those files. There's a wiki area to help provide sort of contextualization or whatever other kind of supplemental information. But you can also connect projects to other storage spaces. So if you're keeping your files in Google Drive or in an institutional OneDrive account, you can connect the OSF project to that account, and then you can have OSF as kind of a front door to your storage that might be in other places. And a really nice thing is that if you're working on a kind of cross-institutional project, you can add as many contributors to an OSF project as you want, as long as they have an OSF account. And they can all contribute files from their various locations. So it can be a great way to centralize resources that may be found in lots of different places. So they're intended as a workspace, but they're also a great public way to share data. And finally, preprints, I probably don't need to describe. We do have several preprint servers. We have a general kind of OSF preprints that will accept any kind of preprint in any subject, any discipline. But we also have a number of community operated preprints that have moderation workflows to ensure that the material that's being added to them is in the disciplinary realm and is not spam and that sort of thing. But they are still preprint servers that are not, for peer review or pre-peer review or post-peer review copies of work. So once you finished your research project, we also have a brand new, as of last fall, search interface in OSF. So it's a great place to collaborate on research, and also a great place to find out what else is going on, or come up with ideas for new projects. So you can search across OSF's 500,000 open projects, registrations, and preprints. And we have various facets and filters for collection membership, institutional affiliation, other kinds of features of the project or data. We have an online search interface, which is I'm showing here. We also have an API available for searching to do more advanced kinds of queries. So OSF is a generalist repository, meaning it's not tied to any particular institution or any discipline or domain or any type of material. So it is a repository, although it's not necessarily organized around file, as you may see in a lot of other repositories, but it does still meet all of these recommendations. This is the NIH's list of desirable characteristics for a repository. So you can see we either meet or are working on all of these aspects. So it is a great place to store data for the long term and make it accessible. OSF takes FAIR and strives to meet FAIR requirements. You are probably also familiar with FAIR. Findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. I just put on this slide a couple of examples of how our metadata helps to make things fair. The data is easily findable. In this case, this project has a DOI. You can mint DOIs through OSF for OSF materials. So we do support PIDs in that way. I list our files page as accessible and interoperable because you can upload any type of file to OSF storage, and you can download any type of file, so you aren't required to have any kind of specific software installed to use those files. We do actually render a large number of files if you want to view them within OSF directly, but you can also download. And licenses are available on all OSF materials. So we have some Creative Commons licenses, some various software licenses, and there's also the option to create and write your own license for OSF material. So that really helps with the reusability, to be able to be really upfront about how materials can be reused. OSF also uses PIDs, or persistent identifiers, pretty extensively. And we create and contribute to a PID graph of information. And we have that in our data, but we also share data externally with PIDs in it. So what this is illustrating, in this example, this user added their ORCID to their account. So that first, this blue arrow is pointing to the ORCID that's associated with their account. And then they uploaded a preprint to our servers, and it was assigned a DOI. That DOI was registered with Crossref. When we sent metadata to Crossref, we included the user's ORCID. And because the ORCID was included in that Crossref record, the preprint now shows up in the user's ORCID record, because ORCID scraped that Crossref data. So all the user had to do in this case was add their ORCID to their account, and it ends up with all of these downstream effects, being able to persistently identify that user in all of these other places. And it all happened automatically because of the way we register and use PIDs and share PIDs in OSF. Finally, I think one of the best things about OSF is that all of these spaces within OSF can be linked together, making a kind of web of connections around a person's work. So this is a registration for a project, and linked here is the project space for the project that registration is describing. Within the project, I have a link back to that registration. I also have a link out to a preprint that was finally submitted based on this project, which also has links back to those registrations and projects. So within the one space, we've got representation of the entire kind of life cycle of the project. And as I also mentioned, we view OSF as a kind of tool in the workflow. It shouldn't have to, nor do we want to kind of do it all. So this slide represents some of the tools we currently integrate with. Most of them are related at this point to storage and citation management. But I'm going to talk in a little bit about some things that are changing in that area, and we will be able to support, hopefully, a lot more types of tools integrated into the OSF platform in the future. This is a project page just showing several add-ons being used in the same project. So I was able to bring in a repository and some stuff on Google Drive and some stuff on Box that a colleague had added to a shared Box drive. So just finally, I think some of the things then that are unique about OSF that don't necessarily happen in other repositories. We can store and share all types of material. Provided it's de-identified data, we don't recommend storing secure or private data on OSF. But you can put data, protocols, methods, literature, code, workflows, anything. It's really agnostic. You can, as I said, register and codify your research ideas and then follow the whole project through the life cycle. You can collaborate with users around the world, and you can use OSF storage spaces, or you could use institutionally owned infrastructure for that. As I said, you can link all parts of the project together, and we do offer the ability to create DOIs for materials that users may not have other methods of doing. So a few years ago, we created an institutional membership program. So OSF, as I've been talking about it, is geared directly to researchers. So researchers can come to OSF and they don't have to be coming in through an institutional affiliation or an institutionally provided tool. But what we wanted to do was to help the researchers and institutions work together, and to help institutions to understand what their researchers are doing in OSF and have that kind of mutually beneficial flow of information. So the institutional membership helps us identify the work of members of that institution in OSF and then aggregate it together. So that can provide back to the institution insight into what their researchers are doing on the platform. So the primary way that works is through integration with your authentication login service, single sign-on. So once users log into the service the first time, they only have to do it once through OSF. We verify through the authentication service that they are a member of that institution. And then we can add a identifier for the institution to the metadata for everything created by that user. So that allows us to first aggregate all that content together into a publicly findable page. It also means that through our API and through a search, you can search by the institution within OSF and get all of the material related to that institution. It also means that when we share that data out into DataCite or Crossref or just through our API, that institution is identified. So downstream, if it gets picked up by some research information management system or something like that, you can know that you are getting the data created by researchers at your institution. In addition, we can then also provide back to the institutional member, often in the library, metrics on how users are using OSF from their institution. We have a very simple metrics dashboard right now, but I literally just my first meeting this morning at 9 a.m. is about a project to improve that and add a lot more data to that dashboard. But we also do quarterly metrics reports that we send out with breakdowns of how many of your users are logging in, how many have ORCID accounts, how much activity are they actually doing on the platform, how many projects and registrations, how much data have they created, and that sort of thing. So really the idea is that researchers are using OSF, and we want to help you kind of know what they're doing and get access and understand them as a community. We also provide prioritized help desk support to users from the institution. So those users get bumped to the top of a queue, they get this tag institutional priority to get a response as quickly as possible. And we are working to create and share more supporting resources to the member institutions about managing OSF, promoting OSF training, using OSF, and really other things to be determined. We're really getting started on that effort. And finally, we're working on more community events for knowledge sharing and collaboration. So we've convened some working groups. We've started having town hall meetings. We send out a regular newsletter, and we do occasional webinars or info sessions. So that was, kind of how OSF fits in with the institutional perspective. I did want to also talk about reporting and compliance. So a primary concern for all of us in the scholarly communication field has been reporting and compliance. As you know, we've seen a number of mandates from different agencies, the data sharing policy from the NIH, the policy from the White House, the Nelson memo, and UNESCO put out recommendations on open science recently. So all of these mandate or recommend various practices related to open sharing of data. And so we've noticed this, and we are working to enable some new features and some new types of support to really address these concerns. So the first, last year, OSF added several new metadata fields to its standard template for all OSF material. And one of those areas of new fields was funding and award information. So funder names can be looked up and added from the Open Funder Registry. So we are getting the PID for the funder, so that the funder can then come back and find any material that has been tagged as having been the result of an award from them. And that again would be available through the search page, excuse me, and the API. So making tracking of that compliance a little bit easier. OSF is also part of the Generalist Repository Ecosystem Initiative, or the GRAY group. And this is a group of generalist repositories that are recommended by the NIH, who are working together to come to some shared understandings of best practices, workflows, tooling, and working together to mutually reinforce those ideas. So the metadata features I was just talking about came out of recommendations from this group. We're about a year into the project, about halfway into this funded project. So there should be lots more coming out of this group as well in terms of changes to OSF. While not direct support at this point, OSF has also been home to some publishing of best practices. Some of you on this call may have been involved in this group that created some best practices around DMP creation. We're also trying to build on this with our working groups for members so that we have more and more types of guidance like this, so that anyone, not just a member, but anyone coming to OSF from the institutional perspective who wants to know, I'm writing a grant and I'm saying that things are going into OSF, what do I need to tell NIH or NSF about OSF and how it works, and making sure that it's meeting those guidelines. So more support resources like that are going to be coming in the future. Finally, I wanted to mention, I briefly alluded to this earlier, but pardon me. We did receive a grant late last year, starting in January, from the National Science Foundation to create more direct, actionable workflows to support data sharing. So among other things. So this grant is giving us the opportunity to create a more collaborative software ecosystem for OSF. So OSF has always been open source, but it has been a bit difficult in the past for the community to truly contribute and collaborate on that development. So as part of this grant, we are going to revamp our APIs and create some new APIs and develop strong community support around them, so that the community can develop their own types of integrations into OSF with other tools. And as part of the grant, we will develop a number of tools, but at the end of the process, we'll have the API with documentation and support community for anybody to be able to pick up and develop other kinds of integrations into OSF. And when I say integrations, I mean tools like using DMP tool to create a DMP and then being able to bring that into an OSF project space, or integrations with lab notebook workflows, institutional repository and archiving workflows, cloud computing. We've already done our first cloud computing integration, where code that's uploaded into OSF can be sent off to be run in the cloud, and then results are sent back to OSF. So that is another big development in the future that I think will create a lot more opportunities for nuanced kind of support for different types of needs and workflows within OSF. So that was all I had in terms of formal slides. So we're here and available to answer some questions. I can do some live demoing of things if that's of interest, or anything else.
Well, thank you, Gretchen. I guess first let's turn it over to members. Is there any questions about the OSF? I think I may be one of a couple people on this call who is a part of that NIH guidance group. Thank you for the shout out there. That's really nice to see. Let me check the document if there are any questions. Yeah, I don't see any questions. So so maybe just a quick demo of a few things that would be of interest.
Sure. 1 second to close some things out. Sorry.
While you're doing that, Gil, I saw you came on video. Did you have a question? No? Okay. Not to call you out, sorry. We do like to see your face though.
Okay. Okay. There we go. So this is my OSF homepage. It shows me kind of my projects. I don't want to log out because I'm gonna have to log back in through sorry, let me try a different one. But I wanted to show you the institutional sign-in option. I just don't
So
have to sign back in with TwoTalker.
I do see that there is a question that's coming
Yeah,
in,
go for it.
cost for storing data. And it's my understanding that there is not a cost at this time, but membership in the OSF or the Center for Open Science is encouraged. That gives you access to different kinds of information. So maybe you can explain the membership tiers and what that might give
Sure.
people.
Sure. So, so OSF storage, because it's free and it's a free tool that anybody can sign up for, there are storage caps on projects and registrations. So if the project is public, you can store 50 gigabytes of data in the project. And that 50 gigabytes also applies to subcomponents of projects. So if you have a project or you call them components, it's just a sub project. If you just create like a child project, you can have 50 gigabytes for each of those children. So theoretically, you can actually have kind of unlimited storage if you can create more and more divisions, more and more sub projects to store that data in. So there's no limit as to the number of projects you can create or the number of subcomponents on a project. I don't think there's a limit on that. I've never seen anybody reach the limit on that. But within the individual project, it is 50 gigabytes, and you can't always break up data that way. For an individual file, the limit is 5 gigabytes. So it's not appropriate for like a giant data set that's a single file. We can increase that storage cap for individual projects, and that's a individual negotiation. We do have a price breakdown on our website, which can be used if someone is, say, applying for a grant and wants to get some funding to create some additional OSF storage space. The institutional membership doesn't come with an increase in the storage cap. However, it does help when if there's someone at your institution who wants to get additional storage space. If the increase is within the kind of lowest level and it's an institutional member, we are highly likely to just do that without cost. So it helps to kind of grease the wheels a little bit on adding that storage space, but that's not a kind of official policy. The institutional benefits are really the single sign-on and the adding of the metadata to the project, to all of the institutional features, the metrics, and then discounts on other COS services. So like the trainings that Crystal can do, we offer a 25% discount on the price of those trainings for institutional members. So the membership kind of benefits come sort of tiered on top of the actual OSF service. The OSF service itself at this point doesn't change for members, except that they can have that institutional association on their data, which may be important to them, for them to be able to, verify that they are a member of this university and this community. And all of those models are, continually being addressed. So I wouldn't say that it's impossible that there won't be something like a default increase in storage for institutional members in the future, but that's not something that we've talked about so far. So this is just the institutional sign-in page. As you can see, there's a number of universities here. And this should take me to their single sign-on. So I'm not a member of UVA anymore. That's another place I worked. So let me switch back over to my Chrome.
If it would help, I'm at ASU.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. I'm logged in over here at Center for Open Science. If you since I am a member of the Center for Open Science now, the Center for Open Science logo shows up here next to my project, and the name is here in this data. And if I were to look directly at this metadata record, I would see the ROR identifier, the Research Organization Registry identifier for COS has been added to the metadata for this project. As you can see, there's a number of subcomponents. So this is what I was talking about in terms of project components. So this workshop sandbox is private right now. We created this for a workshop that I did. If I were to make this public, I would be able to directly store 50 gigabytes of data on this project. But then when I come down into this subcomponent, that would be an additional 50 gigabytes of storage here. So that's kind of what I was trying to describe with the storage. Are there other things that people would like to see? Maybe go over to the new search to show that relationships between things. So, for example, I can limit my search here to preprints that do have links to supplemental materials or data, or do have a registration. So if I look at one of these, well, because I'm on Zoom, I have a link here to the registration for this material. And our new search engine makes it easier to find those things all as related materials. In the registrations, we also have a badging system that right now applies only to registrations, but these registrations, someone has come back at the end of the project and added a link to the data for this project and the code for this project. And that's something you can also search by. So if somebody's looking for data sets, that's one way to get to it, to do a search in OSF, registrations for the kind of project you're looking for, and then limit it to registrations that have links to data. And some of that data may be stored on OSF, and it may be stored somewhere else. The only requirement for adding a link to materials in this registration is that there's a DOI. So it doesn't, this is one case where it doesn't have to be something that's linked within OSF.
So Gretchen, remind me, who is the registry for the DOIs?
So if it is a project or a registration, the DOI gets registered through DataSite. And if it's a preprint, it gets registered through Crossref. So all three of those can have DOIs associated. If you upload a preprint, it will automatically get a DOI created for it. Projects, it's optional. And the DOIs are created at those levels, project registration and preprint, and not at the file level. If you wanted a DOI, like say just for a data set, you could put that in a component and then get a DOI for that component. And that actually is helpful because then you can upload different versions or supplemental files kind of all in the same package.
I see there's a good question in the chat right now from Kevin. It says, is there a data custodian for institutions who would take responsibility for data once somebody leaves the institution, i.e. retires?
So because OSF is, the researchers are creating their accounts with OSF directly, they continue to own their data. What we're doing is adding identifiers for the institution to that data so that it can be found. So this is one of those things with the, say, integrations and add-on tools. One thing we're very interested in is creating workflows to be able to archive materials into your institutional repository, because that's where you want it in terms of your long-term management. With OSF, it's a direct relationship with the researcher. So the researcher continues to have the actual, control or responsibility over that data. That said, the institutional, membership is at the institutional level. So, whomever you tell us should have access to the metrics and should be able to, see the additional reporting data that we give to you, we can share that with anyone at your institution that you'd like it shared with. Let's see. Yeah, you can see up here, you can browse through our various registries and our preprints. If it will, having, I think, some Zoom issues. And this is the list of our institutions. So you can see it's that same search page, but everything now has been limited to just materials that are coming from users at this domain. I didn't think of lots of things to show up.
So workflow question,
Mhm.
like you want to think about this as kind of just a README, right? Like you can't work in it directly while you're analyzing the data. Like it's not integrated with anything like that.
There are some integrations in the other direction. So we have an open API. So there are a couple of tools that have created connectors to OSF. So you could store the data in OSF and then pull it into Galaxy, Open Sesame. But what we're hoping is that the new API will make that much easier for folks to develop those themselves. That's not gonna work. Okay, sorry. Well, we used to have a page with some of those community developed add-ons. I can find them. But yeah, primarily what OSF does on its own is just a place to kind of centrally locate resources that you're going to use. But it's in the development of those integrations that may allow for some more advanced kind of interactions with things. So like I said, we developed a cloud computing add-on for a tool called BOA, which is a query language that can query data sets of repositories of code. So you could get a code repository and you could ask it how many of these files are have Java, or, I'm not a computer science researcher, so I don't know what other questions they're asking, but characteristics of the data set. And so as part of OSF, you can upload the BOA query, which is a specific query language. You can integrate the add-on, and then you can press a button and send that query out to the BOA server, where it'll run that query against its data sets. It has a bunch of data sets. And then it will, and then it'll send back the results directly into your OSF space. So you can't open it up and like edit the code within OSF at this point. That could be a future development. But that's kind of the idea, that more of those interactions back and forth are what we're trying to build towards.
Hmm.
Affiliation, there's a question in the chat. Yes, so affiliations, the question is, can affiliations be added at the component level, not just the project level? Yeah, the affiliations are added to the content. So there's like basically a flag on the user's account that says they're a member of the community. Then when they create content, they have the choice of whether or not they want it to be affiliated with their community. And that would apply at every level that we create an OSF metadata record. So we create metadata record at the project and the component levels. So if I brought somebody in just to this component, they could add their affiliation to this. I can come over here and right. So now I've removed my affiliation from this component, but it is there at the parent level. So yes, it can be adjusted at each level. That's one of the features we're talking about for institutions, is the ability for the institution to be able to go in and add or remove those affiliations if they aren't there. You know, as we said, the content belongs to researchers, so there will probably have to be some kind of opt-in. But that should allow you to even find content or affiliate content that hasn't been created through the possibly through the membership process, and also to remove something. If I create an OSF project to store I'm the vice president of my roller derby league. If I was to use OSF to store our, copy of our handbook that we're working on, I probably don't want that to be associated with Center for Open Science. So I can just remove the COS affiliation from that. And now I can continue to use OSF, and I don't have to worry about the personal and the professional getting mixed up.
Can a person have more than one affiliation? So if your roller derby league did
Yeah.
have an affiliation, you could add that in on your
Yes,
account?
absolutely. You can be affiliated with as many institutions as you can affiliate with. So if you have a sign-in, like if you have the ability to sign in to more than one institution, those can be both associated. Some of our organizations don't use any kind of single sign-in. It's done by email domain. For one of our universities, it's actually done through ORCID. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a single sign-on. That's just usually the one that works the easiest for our, university institutions.
So is that technically different accounts then for a person, or is that?
No, it's all the same account. So
I mean, you're saying you have to log in to add the other affiliation, but I'm wondering
right.
about putting it in from your
So
own.
one of the kind of neat things about OSF is that you can actually have multiple emails and multiple passwords associated with your account. So I have my primary email here is my work email, but my alternate email is my Gmail account. So when I leave the Center for Open Science, all I have to do is make this Gmail account my primary account. And then I can come in and I can log into OSF with the same account. It will prompt me to create a password to log in with my, non-COS email. And you can do the same thing when you have multiple accounts. All you have to do is come in here. If I were to start working at University of Cincinnati again part-time, I could come in here and I would add an alternate email with that University of Cincinnati email address. And then I would go in and I would log in using that account. And on the back end, we would match the existing user with that email address to the ID that we're getting from the single sign-on. And that works most of the time. And when it doesn't work, if you send us an email on the help desk, we can merge them on the back end.
Mm-hmm. I'm coming back to that question about the data custodian. And I guess if somebody has like a service email account, I'm going to call it for lack of a better word, you can set up an OSF account for that and then collect all of the data. Like if somebody's leaving the institution but is required to have the data associated with the institution for whatever reason, then they could maybe shift it to that other account, like
Right.
transfer the ownership of it to that custodian account. As
Yeah,
a,
that's a kind of use case that we're talking about in terms of one of the projects we're going to do this year. We want to support more curatorial and moderation roles. So creating an institutional custodian account could be one way to address it, like you say. The other thing to remember, though, is that when I leave the Center for Open Science, the Center for Open Science affiliation is removed from my account, but not from the material that I created while I was here. So because those things are completely separated, the identifier gets added to the metadata for the object. So you do still have those things affiliated with the institution. The user, if they are required to, you know, have it into some kind of university mediated space, then yeah, there may need to be some additional steps to take there.
but I guess it's kind of separate because the data may have the affiliation, which is sort of like a badge or something, but it's not the ability to, I mean, they're not the owner who has control to make edits or something like that. And that's more like concern, but OSF tracks any kind of edits. So you would know if changes are made, but it's still the possibility that changes could be made. So I
Yeah,
guess like
and
for integrity, security, some things like that.
right, and that's the case with any OSF material because it's owned by the researcher. So we recognize that that's a gap in terms of what a lot of institutions have a mandate to, you know, archive and preserve and manage data. So we're listening and working on features related to that right now. Whether it's OSF as a working space and things can get ported to an institutional repository, whether or not within OSF we create some curatorial or institutional role that can be a co-manager of data or ultimately a long-term, you know, preservation manager of data is another possibility. But that is actually literally a project that is on the roadmap for this year. So we are going to be meeting with our working group next month to kind of talk about what features we want to create. And then we have time later this year to do them. I don't know exactly what shape that's going to take, but it's going to be something to address that issue. I don't know that it will totally address that issue, but we're going to start to make steps towards allowing for more institutional management and curation.
I'm kind of also wondering what that looks like when, because like you can add, you know, Google Drive as a third-party resource, you can add GitHub, you can add other things. I wonder is there going to be, you know, customization for adding the institutional repository as like a third-party kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, we can right now connect with the institutional OneDrive or the institutional Dataverse or the institutional Figshare. We are potentially going to be working on a project to make it so that if the user's associated with an affiliation, we kind of nudge them in the direction of using one add-on over others, or have it set up as some kind of default. And then, yeah, we don't have support though currently for other types of institutional repository like your DSpace or your Samvera or Digital Commons or bpress, whatever anybody's using. So I think those are very highly prioritized for the integrations project that I was talking about. Whether or not it becomes another storage location or it becomes a kind of workflow to move data back and forth to those spaces, I don't know yet, but I think that is another, you know, highly prioritized workflow.
Okay. I know we have like 5 minutes left. It's okay if we do end early. I don't see any additional questions, but I do see people needing to drop off, I think. So are there any last questions for Gretchen? People are liking the ideas of the integration possibilities.
Good, glad to hear it.
Okay. All right, well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
joining us, and I look forward to the educational opportunity that Crystal will be providing here at my campus tomorrow, and hopefully others will get a chance to have it at their campus, right, Crystal?
That would be great. Would love to talk to you guys.
And Gretchen, thank you so much for
Yeah.
the information today,
Mm.
and can always reach out to the OSF. And I don't know if you want to drop your emails in the chat as well.
Just Gretchen@cos.io. I will put a link to my slides in your notes document.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.